So hello guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast episode. I'm totally out of practice, Steve, after 2 weeks of a hiatus, so to speak. It always feels like a lifetime, but only 2 weeks have passed. And we have seen each other like just a week ago in person. So where we've talked, where we've touched on things and all that kind of stuff. We didn't really have the chance to just talk super in depth about things, but it still feels like a lifetime. How are things on your end? How are you? What's going on, training, nutritionally speaking, and all that kind of jazz?
Yeah, me and Charlotte were saying on this weekend, it was like, where were we? We were just like reminiscing about where we were last weekend. And I was like, man, that feels like a lifetime ago, but also really not that long ago. I don't know. It's just it's a weird, surreal feeling when you think those things through, but it actually feels like a lifetime ago already, but it also feels like it was only really not that long ago. Anyway, I don't know. That makes no sense. It sounds completely contradictory.
No. I think it makes sense because I was just saying the other day to Katie as well, when we drove back home from our honeymoon trip, that the week is over. Basically, the entire wedding ceremony is now over. The part of like the wedding preparation, the wedding event, post-wedding, and then going on a honeymoon and coming back again. Now it's all over. And when we drove back on Friday evening, that was already marking an entire week. I was just like on Saturday shocked that it has been a week ago since we've actually met up and had our wedding ceremony.
Yeah, it's wild. I imagine just the wedding day for you just like went super duper quickly.
Unfortunately, and and also there, both Katie and I said, I would have loved if the day would just start over again and happen exactly the same way another time. This was kind of like a Groundhog Day, but in a positive sense that I would like to relive a couple of times, not over and over and over again, because then it becomes a nightmare as well, but yes. At least kind of like, I don't know, another time, because everything went by so fast. The good thing is though, everything went also super smoothly, and it never felt like there was too much of a time in between where there wasn't something going on and people calmed down too much and got tired because of that. Because sometimes at weddings, you're then sitting at the table for like 2, 3, 4 hours, and people start to get tired and get bored and all that kind of stuff. And that didn't feel like it, at least not for me. And of course, I'm biased, but I don't know how it was for you, Steve. Maybe you're telling me the opposite of it, that you got very bored, that everything felt super slowly and all that kind of stuff.
I was shocked when, I can't remember when it was, someone came over to me and was like, I think Hannah was asking Harry, like, what's the time? When are we going? And then they like told me the time, and I was like, how the fuck is it midnight? And I was shocked because I didn't feel tired at all. I was just like completely fine. And I was shocked that it was that late because I was like, where is the time gone?
Yeah.
So no, it absolutely felt that way. Like I felt like I could have stayed up longer and continued into the night. But I also was like, hey, it was getting quieter anyway. You'd already gone to bed, I think, at this point, and you'd stayed up much later than you normally would as well, which, I mean, of course, it's your wedding night. I'd almost hope you did. So I ended up going to bed at like, I don't know, it was like 1 a.m. rather. At the time.
It was so shortly after me, because it was the same as you. I thought like, it's getting late now. Do I really need to force myself staying up now? It's probably going to get quieter anyway now. Let's just go to bed so that the next day isn't completely ruined. And it turned out to be a wise decision, because I was still then able to get a training session in the next day before then leaving for then the honeymoon trip. And over the entire weekend, I still managed to get all of my training sessions in, which I didn't actually plan initially. I had it planned out to get a rest day on a Saturday and even Sunday, because I didn't really think that I would make it or find the time and actually going to get a training session in. And yet I made it happen, even though that I was feeling a little bit tired on the Sunday, but still made it happen. And to be honest, especially over that weekend, especially because we stayed there, same as you, Steve, on Friday already, before we actually went to that location, I even said to Katie, like, hey, Katie, I just want to talk with you about it, because I know myself and I don't want to spread any kind of negative vibes here But for me personally, I like my structure. I like my routine. It's giving me pleasure. It's giving me happiness. And it's just what I need to some extent. So don't be, sad about it when I'm getting up early in the morning and I'm going out on a walk and I don't want to stay in bed or anything alike. And she knows it, but she was very grateful for me talking through it. Just once again, telling her that it's not about her. It's not that I don't enjoy the entire event, but I just need a little bit of structure. I still need a little bit of routine because it gives me so much satisfaction in return. Some people may seem this, or may think that this is a little bit of a neurotic tendency and dogmatic tendency. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm just not seeing it right now. Maybe in a couple of years I will look back and be like, oh man, what was wrong with me? But right now, for me personally, I'm now 36 years old. The older I get, the less I'm willing to make compromises when I know what does me well and what makes me happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it makes, I think the word there is compromises, and knowing the key is in your situation, when do you need to compromise versus not? And it's like, hey, you have, because I was actually speaking to Charlotte, I was like, man, sometimes when like Pascal can do all these things, like I was like, it made me feel, I think the word, and it was like you said, like it, from the outside in, it could look dogmatic or like, hey, chill out, Pascal, or whatever. And I was like, I'm actually, it's the feelings I was getting was like jealousy versus like you shouldn't be doing it. It was like, hey, I'm actually jealous that Pascal can do that in his situation where he has a wife that's understanding and he has kids that she's happy to take care of or whatever, or they're very well behaved and you can go do it. It's like, it's actually not Pascal that is frustrating me. I'm like, hey, why can't I like do that in every situation where I can actually like maintain my routine? Yeah. So I was, because ideally like I would have been the same over that weekend, but it's like, I just didn't have the flexibility to be able to do it. Like I didn't have a car or something that I could go do these things.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah. So I think it's like, I think most people would say when you can maintain a routine that you love, and it doesn't, and you said this about when you went on holiday, like it doesn't take away or detract from anything else. It doesn't compromise what other people are doing. Then why would you not do that? Like, and I said this to you when you messaged me, you're like, guess where I am? And I was like, you know, you're clearly in the gym. And I said, when it's there, take it. Like when you've got the opportunity, take it. Like, what's the point of just like lying in bed? Like, what are you doing at that point? Like go get your session in if that's going to make you feel good, and all the better that Katie can be mature enough and like happy enough to let you go do that.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts around this, and I think that one of the things that you brought up is very important to point out. It should never really come at the cost of other expenses, so to speak. You shouldn't just do your own thing, because that would be highly selfish, of course. And while bodybuilding is a selfish sport, it doesn't really have to sacrifice some quality aspects of life, or, I don't know, destroy relationships. It doesn't have to go that far. And when I'm talking about my structures and routine, once again, it doesn't really come at the expense of others. I'm trying to still make some compromises that I did for myself. I don't even need to talk them out loudly or talk them through with someone like Katie. What I'm then doing is I get up as early as I can to get my training sessions in, for example. Or I get up early in the morning when the other people are still asleep to get my steps in, right? And the same then also with the training session on Sunday. While it wasn't my usual typical time of getting my training session in, it was like we had breakfast at the venue, went home. I still helped in actually then putting everything, of course, into the apartment. We packed our stuff for the Mallorca. Everything was finished. And I made sure that there was a time gap where I would be allowed to then go to the gym. Not allowance from someone else, but where I was taking care enough of other people around me that I know that my decision and my behavior doesn't impact them in the slightest. For them, it wouldn't really make any kind of difference of whether I'm sitting now on the couch or whether I'm off to the training session for like 1 or 2 hours. And that, I think, is super important if you are trying to maintain some of your routines and the structure that you like and enjoy, that other people should barely notice it. And if they notice, then communicate that. And it should still be something where they would say like, okay, go ahead, do this because it doesn't really impact me anyway. As long as you're back home at around like XYZ and we can do what it is that we plan to do, such as on Mallorca, for example, then I'm fine with that. Because also on that note, and then we can, of course, I'll let you talk as well, Steve. On Mallorca, I was trying to find a gym that was opening up as soon as possible in the morning. Because I thought like, hey man, I'm feeling fresh and early in the morning I'm getting up anyway. So let's find a gym that opens up at around maybe like 6. And I found a gym that was also properly equipped or very well equipped. However, it was like 25 minutes away by car. But I thought like, hey, when I'm arriving there at 6 a.m. in the morning, I get my training session in and I will be home at around like 7:30. It would be the same as if we were at home and then do things there. And the other people won't really notice, especially on holiday, they are sleeping a little bit longer. And that's the compromise that I did for myself, where I said to myself, okay, these are the rules. These are the limits that I'm setting for myself. It needs to be as early as possible so that the other people aren't impacted by that. So that they are saying like, okay, you go ahead, do your training session so that we can go ahead afterwards to do or go on with our day.
Yeah, and I'm glad you explained it because it's like people might hear that and be like, oh, you trained on holiday. And so, I don't know, Katie was like getting the kids up and they were waiting around for 2 hours whilst you got your session in. And they're like, we got to go out now because now you've just wasted 2 hours of our day.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you've done that in your own time. The compromises of whatever that might be to you, like the awkwardness of going and getting that session at a different time, slightly different sleeping schedule, slightly different nutrition, maybe to make it work though, and get the best out of both scenarios basically. And I can respect that. And it's something that took me a little bit of time, was realizing that my rational brain, and as rational as I sometimes cannot be, but sometimes I can be rational, especially with food, is that it's not the same for everyone else. So like with Charlotte, like she will want to partake in maybe a certain food, like a takeaway or something, whereas I'm just like, man, I'm just happy eating my boring foods. And I'm like, you go do whatever you want. But then she's like, yeah, but I want you to be involved with the thing I'm doing. And I'm like, that makes no sense. You can still enjoy whatever it is. You don't need me. And it's like, yeah, but she does need me. So I'm like, I can flex now and then to enjoy this thing with you, even though it's not what I'd ideally want to do. Like those sort of compromises as well, where you just learn a person and the way they tick isn't always how you tick as well. And it's like you said, when you get into a position, and I'm so grateful with Charlotte when she does this sometimes. I think this is why sometimes people are like, hey, you have to get a kind of partner who's also into it like you are, because they won't understand these things. It's like, no, you just need to be a understanding person. Like Charlotte, when she's like, yeah, you go get a session, and oh yeah, that's totally fine. Like sometimes I'm even surprised by how chill she is about it, because I'm worried she's going to be like, oh no, this is going to be awkward or annoying. It's like, no, that's totally legit and fine. And she understands how important it is to me. So it's awesome that Katie's the same way, where she's just like, yeah, like that's not going to impact anything I'm doing. You go do that. Make sure you're home by this time so we can get to the airport, whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. But I think it's also a form of a healthier relationship. You can't just always just request from someone else to be flexible for the things that you want to do, but then in return not be flexible for the other person. And I think also it's a level of maturity to allow the other person to do whatever it is that they still feel like they want to do. Of course, also there with some limitations and restrictions, of course. But I even also said to Katie, and this has been years ago and I still stand by it, if there's ever a time where she feels that she needs to do something that goes against what I think is the appropriate thing, we can talk through it. And in the end, it's her decision. I may not like it, but it's not my life to then decide on. And who am I to tell someone else what they are supposed to do with their lives? Of course, now there are kids involved, so the decision of someone else has to be even more well thought through, because it doesn't really just impact the relationship, but also then impact the kids. But also there, we see it all the time, right? That people are starting to have some behavior change or some changes in their personal preferences, or feel like they need to do something. And if ever a time comes like this, I don't hope so, but if ever it comes to this, I would still be like, I don't like it, but go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I totally respect that. Yeah, I don't know where to go from here. How's it been? How was Mallorca? The wedding obviously was amazing. People want to hear about the brownie cake. I've already had a client be like, hey, you didn't talk about the brownie cake, or I didn't see it. They wanted to see a picture of the brownie cake.
Yeah.
Obviously, we both had some.
to go a little bit more in depth of these kind of things. First and foremost, brownie cake was all right. It wasn't for me personally. Probably also not so much for you, Steve. Hannah loved it. I know the chocolate cream on it was very, very chocolatey. And it was more like a typical cake, way too sweet for me personally. What I like about brownies is just like that mushiness, right? And this one was creamy, had lots of nuts in it. It wasn't really a brownie, to me at least not. But for, of course, the general audience that was at the wedding, I think most people very much enjoyed it. Then in regards to Mallorca, way too warm. It's definitely not my thing. And probably you can attest to that as well, Steve. You, in a bulking scenario, eating 4,000 calories, you would sweat your ass off in an environment like this. Way too hot for me personally. The food.
Did you have aircon?
Yes, luckily we did.
Thank God.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I don't know how we otherwise would have survived this, because it was like constantly 35 degrees upwards on a daily basis. Lots of UV50 sun cream. That's a must. But I've seen, it was so funny, Steve, because it's a cliche with Brits on Spanish islands. You can really see and detect the Brits. First and foremost, by the looks of the haircuts of the boys. You know what haircut I'm talking about right now? What's trendy in the UK?
Is it? I actually don't even know which specific haircut. Is it the like curly head on top and like shaved, like skin fade?
Exactly. It's kind of like mushroom look, right? Kind of shaved off the sides and kind of like just like this, So you could always detect it. And I played a little bit of a game where I said like, okay, there are some people from the UK again, and most of the time it turned out to be right. And often it's so crazy because it's a cliche that has been also there fulfilled once again. Most of the time, the UK people or the Brits, they were kind of sunburned. So many of them. And I don't know what's up with you guys. Why do you want to get a sunburn? I don't get it.
It's dumb as fuck. It's so dumb. It makes no sense. I thought you were going to bring up like some, like, don't know, I'm thinking like maybe expats or just like, don't know, guys on holiday with like their huge beer guts and just like brown as fuck and like just that was because we stayed far away from Palma, probably. Okay.
We were on the opposite side of the island and it was lovely there, like honestly lovely. But at the same time, it's also something that we've talked about, Steve, and this brings us back to kind of fitness and nutritional related things. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so I want to put this out as a disclaimer so that I don't grind anyone gears or that someone feels offended by it or that some kind of locals from Spain listening now to the Improvement Season podcast get offended by it. I think, and I know it will probably ruffle some feathers. I think Mediterranean cuisine is overrated and romanticized. Probably it is also due to then the environment that people are in. They are kind of in the south. Weather is great. They are on holiday. So everything is a little bit more like you put the pink tainted glasses on. So everything is just more amazing. And you see it even on the reviews on Google or something like TripAdvisor. Everything is a 5-star rating restaurant. When in reality, it wasn't, right? Everything was just so greasy and fatty and was dripping in olive oil. And Katie loved it. But it's just not the way that I prefer eating because I personally tend to eat low in fat. And that is not kind of it's not an intentional decision. It's just something that I prefer. And everything was just so greasy and so oily. Everything was just basically olive oil with XYZ. It wasn't like, I don't know, squid with a little bit of olive oil over it. It was kind of olive oil soup with XYZ.
It always makes me think of when Jamie Oliver, do you know, you've heard of Jamie Oliver, I guess, the cook. He just adds shitloads of olive oil to everything. He's just like, yeah. And he's all into his like healthy eating. I'm like, yeah, I mean, olive oil, unsaturated fats is probably one of the best fats you could be consuming.
That's true.
But not excessive amounts. Where it's like, and I'm imagining for you, Pascal, maybe you use spray oil, but apart from that, like you're not adding fats to meals.
That's the thing, Steve. So many people are always talking about German efficiency and German engineering, right? But in reality, we are so archaic when it comes to so many things. So, for example, the governmental systems or the educational system is so far behind with everything, and it's not about German efficiency anymore. That is a myth from the maybe 80s or 70s or whatever, you know. We don't even have spray oil.
You don't?
We don't.
Damn.
So we would need to pay a shit ton of money at a supplement company to actually get those oils, where then a bottle of oil is like 20 euros or so. And yeah, you can't really get it in a supermarket, which is very unfortunate.
So if you cook in a pan, do you ever cook in a pan then or not?
Yes.
And
I'm doing it the old school way. I'm pouring it in, and then I'm just spreading it with a little bit of, I don't know, a piece of, what is it, kind of like?
Kitchen roll.
Kitchen roll, exactly.
Yeah.
The old school way.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
But so the spray, that's what I end up doing. Like I don't add oil to meals. It's only if I'm cooking something in the pan, I use the spray oil and do like 9 sprays, which is 1 gram of fat. It's like versus even a teaspoon of oil, like that stuff adds up quite a lot. Only I have a few times massing added like a tablespoon of olive oil to like vegetables or something. And in that scenario, it makes sense, and it actually makes it easier to get them down. But a lot of the time, like especially when you're dieting, you don't want oil added to everything. And it seems to be, I know the Mediterranean diet is actually one of the healthier ones too. Like in research, it's one of the ones that comes out on top very regularly. And I think it is ultimately like a good fundamental diet, but it's just not to our taste. It's not really, you don't think of bodybuilding and think, Mediterranean diet.
No. Also, they served way too little vegetables, in my opinion. Every single time that you've ordered something, there was just either no vegetables at all, or just a very tiny piece that was also kind of swimming in olive oil. That was unfortunate, honestly.
Restaurants are like this.
Yeah. I love my serving of vegetables, and also maybe a little bit of a clean salad that isn't kind of dripping in olive oil or any other sauce or dressing or anything I like. And I know also there to the listener, it may sound like, man, you guys have some serious problems here talking about food on a holiday on Mallorca and all that kind of stuff. It's just we are talking through it in a nutritional sense that this wouldn't be my preferred place to eat all of the time. And I know, Steve, that you are kind of the same when you've been to Tenerife, that you had kind of similar experiences there.
Yeah, it's just, the food's not going to be like what you would ideally choose. Exactly. A lot of kind of quote unquote normal people would enjoy this like style of eating, whatever, but it's just not like everything comes with chips. And it's like, if you get a salad, there's coated in dressing, no point eating it. Like it's just not to our preferences. So,
and to be fair,
and it's a compromise you made though for the holiday,
exactly.
Right?
And to be fair, exactly. I just wanted to touch on that one as well. I still went ahead and ate all of my meals and all of the foods that have been served. Because I don't really like... It
would be a bit weird if you didn't.
Yeah, and I don't really like when people are saying like, I just wanted to enjoy holiday, because you can enjoy holiday without overindulging, without completely just turning off your mentality, mindset, your mindful eating and all that kind of stuff. I'm still going in there. I'm still making mindful decisions. I'm still taking a look at the food that is in front of me. And then in my head, I'm just like, all right, this is a little bit fattier. So I probably have to just save some calories here and there. And it turned out to be great, because I came back home, same scale weight, which I expected will be much, much lower, because we still were quite active and it didn't really feel like I was eating a lot of calories. And this just says a lot of how fatty the meals were. You had the perception that you weren't really consuming that many calories, also just from the sheer size, because I was already saying that they didn't really serve a lot of vegetables, they didn't really serve a lot of salads and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't really feel like a lot of calories consumed, but in the end it was, because once again, I was way more active. We were way more active. We were active from morning time to night time, and yet still I came back at the same body weight.
Yeah, I think on that, just on the note of like, I just want to go and enjoy my holiday. I think it's really interesting because I think some people enjoy things differently in that probably a lot of the listeners, us included, like part of the enjoyment is coming back and knowing that we're still on track. Whereas I wouldn't, if I came back from that holiday and I was like, man, I've gained 5 pounds. I'd be like, every time I go on holiday, I'd be like thinking about this 5 pounds that I'm bound to gain because I want to enjoy my holiday. It's like, hey, maybe you would just enjoy it more if you were a little bit tighter with things, or a little bit more moderated in your eating behaviors, or maybe just keep really active like you did. Like you can kind of do it that way too. And yeah, I find it's like the whole calories don't count on your birthday. I'm like, man, but they do. You wouldn't say the same thing about money. Like on your birthday, money doesn't count. It's like, yeah, it does. If you go into debt, you're still in debt. You have to pay it off.
I think you bring up some fantastic points. First and foremost, that of course the perception of what is enjoyment always depends and differentiates between individuals. Absolutely. But I think what's universally true is that some moderation and some mindfulness of your decisions is just recommended, because you wouldn't go about it the same way in other aspects of life as well. And is the short-term satisfaction really kind of so much more important than the long-term satisfaction and also happiness about yourself? I would say definitely not. Definitely not. And that's why I think, because you're an adult, you can make those decisions. You can act rationally in certain situations and weigh the pros against the cons. And the pros, like, for example, if you want to take an extreme example, of course, taking cocaine is probably be fun in the moment. You will have a fucking great time. But afterwards, when you're getting up in the morning, man, your nose is stuffy, you're feeling massively down and all that kind of shit. Do you really want to go through this the entire time? No. Right? So you better make a rational, adult-like decision. It's kind of there as well. Yeah, maybe you enjoyed everything in that you didn't track and you completely did mindless eating, just like you ate whatever you wanted. You come back 5 pounds heavier, you would probably feel miserable for the next couple of weeks. Was it really worth the trade-off? Probably not.
And I think that's the key, is just having that awareness. That's always what I talk to my clients about, like weigh up the pros versus cons, make that decision for yourself, have that accountability and control, and you'll feel better for it. Because sometimes they are thinking they need to be extra strict or whatever it is. But I'm like, hey, weigh up the pros versus cons. Maybe it's worth it to you to just like switch off for a little bit, and the consequences really aren't that big for you. And actually, as a example of this for us both, I think, I don't know if Christmas, I keep saying Christmas, it's ages in the future. On your wedding day, yeah. I keep saying Christmas cake when I'm saying wedding cake. On your wedding day, you didn't really track that day, right? It just wasn't worth the effort to the reward ratio. It was just like,
at the same time, it was basically impossible to really track. And I think that this is kind of a skill that has been developed over time. When people are now talking about intuitive eating, it's not really intuitive. It is more, well, it kind of is intuitive, but it stems from the fact that you've been doing this since such a long time that you can do it without thinking that much about it. It's kind of like when people are talking about intuitive behavior when you are a professional in a specific field, like a doctor who has been doing the same procedure like thousands of times, like a surgeon or so, right? It's kind of like an intuitive thing for him already to go through all of those processes as well. And it's kind of the same here. I'm still going in there. There was, like, for example, the dinner that was served was freaking fantastic. Honestly, it tastes so great. We had a huge palette of different meats. And I could have easily taken another plate because it tastes great. And I thought, like, hey, man, it's my wedding. And also at the same time, I'm paying for that. And it's freaking delicious. So I could have easily had another plate. But I didn't want to because I knew the potential consequences are I'm probably much more stuffed afterwards. I feel less confident afterwards because of that. I'm still walking around, still active with a massively fat belly then afterwards.
Dancing.
Be uncomfortable walking around, dancing, having conversations, standing around and all that kind of stuff. No, I made a mindful decision of like, hey, it's enough. One plate, more than enough, right? We still have a little bit of dessert. So I went over there, had a little bit of piece of cake. Like it was very little because I then shared it with my youngest son. I knew that he wanted to have something of it as well. I had like 4 alcohol-free beers as well that were kind of untracked. I knew that it's still somewhere in the range of like, what is it? 100 kcals per bottle or so. Totally fine, right? And then I just went about it. I made some calculated decisions and tried my very best to, I always hate this, but eat like an adult. And everyone kind of knows what this means. You don't have, so eating like an adult doesn't mean to have like 2 plates that were kind of mountains on it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's people's interpretation of adult. I think it just means mature, eating like a mature person versus most adults are obese, so don't eat like an adult.
That's true. You're making a good point here. So maybe it's not the right terminology.
It's like, again, saying like eating clean or whatever.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people listening know what that means, but it can trigger some people. And so it's like, okay, I understand why that triggers you, but also like most people understand what I mean. Yes. So it's like, anyway.
Yeah.
But it was the same thing with me. It was like you said, it was kind of, I was just chatting, I was moving, I was interacting. I just didn't have the opportunity to be able to track what I was having. Like there was like a few alcohol-free little like champagne-like drinks and things that I was having. And then like I had the whole thing of cake because I know my calories are much higher than yours. So I was like, yeah of course I'm eating the whole freaking cake.
And to be fair,
the food was great.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think for someone like you, who requires much more calories and who is in a gaining phase, it's much harder to actually get to that caloric target then or be in a specific range than it is for me. Because the more untracked foods you're eating, the more you don't really know where you're at.
Yeah,
and for me personally, right, I can still kind of estimate in my head and get closer to it than you do, I think.
Yeah, you're nearer the target, so it's a little bit, and there's less to have to track, basically.
Exactly.
And it's the same way, actually. I talk about this when clients are dieting and they want to go out for a meal. I'm like, mate, eat less than you, because at least then it's less to be wrong on. Like if you have a 10 to 20% error rate, if it's 1,000 calories versus 500, that's less calories to be wrong about, if you know what I mean. So if they're like saving 2,000 calories, I'm like, man, if you're 10 to 20% off, that could be a big differential versus half that or half that again.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't like doing that because they want to eat a lot.
Let's take a short break and then we will be back with a little bit more talk around this. Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger. So here we are back again. What I wanted to start doing, Steve, is often we talk about, of course, what has happened for us in the past week. And I think sometimes I would like us to give some more of practical takeaways. So for example, also here, when it comes to social events, we've talked about it a couple of times in the past on how to go about it. But for example, in an event like this, to kind of more systematize it, to conclude whether there was more of an intentional thing behind it of what it is that we did going into the day so that people can pick their pieces from it and then hopefully tackle future social events, weddings or holidays in a much, much better way, I think would be highly appreciated. What do you think about this?
Yes, we can try and do that.
Yeah, I don't. Based on what it is, based on your reaction, I think that you are the same as me, that you don't know where to start.
Yeah, at least one of the takeaways I can definitely talk about here was weighing up the pros versus cons for you in terms of rigidity to like flexibility. Like that might differentiate depending on the phase that you're in, cutting, prep, general off season, what have you, how many calories you're on too. That might differ a little bit more for you, but also might just depend on the seriousness of your goals. If you're much more like, people call it lifestyle or gen pop, non-competitive essentially, or less serious, or if you're very serious, like you want to go pro in the next few years, like that might mean you kind of are a little bit more strict about things. And again, just looking at like, okay, if it's just, I don't know, you and me are going to like Charlotte or Katie's friend's wedding, where it's like, hey, like this is not like a huge event for me. I just want to be dialed in because I don't need to like go overboard or do any of these things to enjoy this. I can be on point. Whereas your own wedding or like your best friends, it might be a case of, okay, let's be a bit more chilled, a bit more relaxed, that sort of thing. And then it's also knowing yourself, like, do you get stressed about tracking anyway day to day? Okay, maybe you pull back because it's just going to stress you out big time and just focus on habits. Whereas if tracking actually reduces stress, you feel really good about it. Okay, maybe you track the majority of the day and just like mindfully eat one of the meals where you're like, okay, most of my plate's protein, veggies, and then some carbs, depending on where you're at. And then moderate the amount of cake you have or whatever, or alcoholic beverages, that sort of thing. I think just going into the day with a plan will set you up so well. Whereas if you just go in blind and you're like, oh shit, I haven't eaten protein for 8 hours. It's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like maybe go in with a plan of like having a protein shake in the morning, having a good protein feed in the morning, and then have a protein bar in your pocket, that sort of thing. Yeah. If you are dieting, or even if you're not, like that's something I would have considered too. So
funny enough, I had a protein bar with me on that day because I just wanted to be prepared. And it turned out to be the right decision to have it in the fridge, ready then to be consumed, because there was this time from breakfast then where then the wedding ceremony took place, where then we were served kind of fruits and cakes and also champagne. There was no protein around. And I would have otherwise gone from the breakfast to then dinner time without any kind of protein serving. Is that a big deal? No. But can you plan for it so that you actually reduce it to be even lesser of a big deal? Yes, absolutely. Right? And then I went to my apartment just very quickly, consumed a protein bar, came back.
The reason I'm laughing.
You had the same thing.
Yeah. Me and Mike both ate a protein bar. In fact, even Charlotte got a little bit of a snack from our room. So yes, I had a protein bar in my. Did I have it in my pocket? I think I actually had it in my jacket pocket or something, or somewhere.
Do you know? I don't know if there ever was a time in the UK where there was a yes cake. Do you know a yes cake?
No.
Okay, so in the 90s, it was kind of, at least I think, and do remember that it was in the 90s, there was a candy, it's kind of more like a candy bar, a small cake that you could buy at a supermarket that was called Yes. And it was always in an advertisement on TV, basically, where they used this as a spontaneous birthday cake or celebration cake, where then the person was unprepared and someone around them had birthday, and then they went to the supermarket, bought kind of a small candle, put them into the birthday cake or the yes cake, and served this one. And everyone was laughing. And I just imagined that the protein bar was exactly that you went into your apartment, put a small candle on it, and ate it, such as the other people ate the normal cake.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like we always say, like, it's so easy to have had that in my jacket pocket, or your room was on the venue, like you took 5 minutes, like you're going to the toilet to just have this thing. And again, I think it's so important to assess whether or not these behaviors are coming from like a neurotic, stressful place where it's like, okay, that's disordered. Because some people listening to that, I reckon, would definitely think, hey, that's coming from a disordered eating place, where it's like, actually, it truly wasn't at all. It was just like, hey, haven't eaten protein in a while, have this bar in my pocket, let's get that in. Like, I'm a bit hungry now too. Dinner's a bit later, Like, I'm just prepared. It's like, hey, I don't know. It wasn't coming from a stressful, disordered place. Like I said, Charlotte had a snack. It just wasn't protein. It was just because she was a bit hungry.
To add a little bit of context and make it a little bit more understanding and visualize it a little bit more so, it wasn't consuming you, the entire thing. No. Because sometimes when it's a stressful situation, you can't really get your mind off of that one single thing. So for example, when it comes, and we had times like these, right? Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had times like these in the past where then we were in a social situation and we were stressing out about maybe the next meal. And we were just thinking about, I have to now get in my meal, or I have to get in my training session. And I actually don't enjoy being here because it takes away from what I have to do. And this is kind of neurotic and dogmatic behavior. And that's not how it was. It wasn't an over-consuming thought that was in the back of your mind the entire time when you were talking to someone else, that you've been thinking about protein bars when the other person was talking about houses.
For your ceremony.
Exactly. That wasn't like that. It was more like, hey, other people are eating a piece of cake here. Perfect timing to get my protein bar. Let's do this. And 2 minutes later, you're back having consumed a little bit of protein. And once again, if I hadn't had the chance to consume it, or same as you guys, all right, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
That's the key. I was going to say, if I didn't have it, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. I just probably would have tried to eat more of the barbecue meat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I missed out on a bit of protein here, so let's get some more.
And one thing that you've basically touched on is, once again, falling back to the analogy about the dimmer switch that you're always talking about. And I so much love this analogy about a dimmer switch that you can apply to so many aspects of life. So, and you can use it initially, but also over a longer time frame. So for example, in a gaining phase, you have kind of different temperature regulators on that dimmer switch, for example, or kind of, I don't know, the light intensity, if you really want to put it this way. And also in a cutting phase, it's a little bit of a different light. And even initially on a daily basis, you can have and use that dimmer switch. So for example, then on a wedding day, you turn off the dimmer switch a little bit more so, or turn it more so towards zero, because you know it's kind of the wedding. And then on a Sunday, maybe you turn it a little bit more so back up again. And then on holiday, on the honeymoon, you turn it a little bit back again, right? This way you can always think about it without stressing about it. And if you can, you turn it up or dial it up. And if you want to or need to, you can dial it back down again. And there's no right or wrong answer here. But what I would avoid is always going from just like turning it off or turning it fully on.
So well said. This actually reminds me of something I have in my spreadsheet. It's like a 1 through 5 accuracy. And I actually talk clients through it. And I have descriptions of like 5 is tracked and weighed everything. And I'm like, when I talk to my clients, if they're in off season and I see 5s, I'm like, do they need to be 5s? Are you doing that because you feel like you have to have a 5? Because for me personally, I much prefer to see a bit of a 4 or even some scattered 3s in there in an off season. Whereas, dieting 4s and 5s, where 4's like, hey, I track everything, but I don't weigh out like fruit and veg, for example. I'm like, hey, that's a really that's a really healthy position to be in, like during an off season. 3 is like maybe you guesstimate a meal out, which might happen every now and then. So I'm like, that's great. 2s and 1s, they're the ones I don't want to see so frequently, because that's where you're making a lot of guesstimations. You're not really tracking that much, but that might be like a wedding day or an occasion like this. And then you look at the average for the week. Most of the time it should be like a 3 through to 5, depending on the phase that you're in. And that's like a depiction of this dimmer switch, where I'm actually careful to, like, again, if my client's in off season and they're just every single day 5 out of 5, I'm like, do you want to try scaling it back a little bit? Just see if you get a little bit less stress from not weighing out your banana. It's just a banana. And I'm like, it could just be that step that just gives them that allowance. But it's also similar for me. Like most of my time, I'm like dead 4s. The only thing is I don't weigh and track when I can. I work from home. Like my scale is just there. Like, okay, I don't weigh and track. I track a banana, but I don't weigh it out. I don't weigh out an apple. But almost everything else I am on point, because I just can be. Like I can have that full brightness. But if I was in a more challenging position, or if I was working like away from home, I'm traveling, anytime I'm traveling, I might have to move that down to a 3 just on that occasion. But it's not causing me stress. It's just being at the appropriate intensity for the position that you're in and your goals at the time.
Yeah. No, I think that was very well put, also with practical applications and also examples here on how to go about it. And it once again also comes kind of back to my takeaway, and that is then moderation. Because you said it yourself, kind of you're always kind of dialing it back and forth, but you're never really completely switching it off, and you're never really completely turning it fully on. Right? And I think that sometimes I have the feeling that moderation is unsexy. And it's something that is not desired or the people don't really strive for. Whereas I think that in most scenarios, moderation is what it is that you should be aiming for, because it leads most of the time to long-term satisfaction of what it is that we have talked about a little bit earlier already. If you're jumping straight into things and you're just overindulging in the moment, right? This is kind of also binge-like behavior. In the moment, it feels good. It satisfies you. But shortly after, either shortly after the meal or a couple of hours after the meal or the next day or then the next week when you're stepping on the scale again, it doesn't feel so good anymore. Right? And then you wished that you had a little bit more of a rigid or moderate approach to things. And I think that this applies to so many aspects of fitness and training and nutrition, that moderation is most of the time, if not all of the time, the way to go. Because I can't really think of a scenario where going off the extreme end is a positive thing, at least not when it comes to an endeavor such as bodybuilding, which is such a sport that requires so much time investment over a long period of time, not just in a short period of time. And if you then have extreme approaches in a short term, you often won't really reap the benefits from it. You often just dig more of a hole, whether it is in a training session and you're just like going fully all out, you're just increasing the risk of getting injured, you're increasing the risk of getting burned out. And the same goes also for nutrition. If you overindulge because you think that you want to enjoy things, often it leads to a dissatisfaction later down the line. And why can't you just enjoy things in moderation? You still have that piece of cake, right? Why do you need to have then five spoons of it? Why not 2? Right? It's a caloric difference that may already be double the amount or so, right? So it can make a huge difference. And moderation, I think in so many instances, especially when it comes to enjoying events like these social occasions, is something that many people should aim for.
Yeah, I wonder if it comes from like talking about bodybuilding to the extreme. That's where that clean eating comes from, right? Where people are like, no, everything should be clean. Even in my off season, I should maintain all the habits that I have during my contest prep. And then they're so strict and rigid, brightness fully on, that when an occasion comes where they can't be fully on, they're like, I'm all off then. Like that's all they have. They just have an on and off switch. They don't have this ability to dim things. Whereas if you're never fully on, especially in an off season, you just don't need to be. It's enough to be slightly away from it and have that moderation to have sustainability. When you can't be there, you just dial it back a slight bit. You don't have to be fully off. And that's where, again, clean eating, cheat meals, these extremes. And it's like you said, in life, when there's an extreme high, it's followed by an extreme low. And that's pendulum swinging is not typically like very sustainable for people. So you got to be careful about that. And I, like you see it probably with your clients too, where we're trying to get more to that, like, okay, we have a range of eating behaviors. We don't want to swing between them so much. We just want to kind of go between them depending on what's appropriate at the time. And
it also then applies to something like macro cycle design, where then sometimes people get so burned out by the diet or maybe even in a gaining phase that they go off the extreme other end. And often it also happens in a cutting phase. You've been cutting for a long time and you feel that you've restricted yourself so much and you duck yourself so much into a hole that you're craving so much shit that the willpower and also the short-term commitment and dedication is just forgotten. And then you give into it. It just requires then that one single spark to create a forest fire, basically.
Yeah.
And you should never really let the ground dry out that much that one single spark can ignite a massive and devastating forest fire.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. I can't think of any other practical take-homes from that.
No, neither
weekend.
can I.
Apart from the only other one was what you spoke about, is that like sticking to your routine and structure and just being aware of the compromises and balancing that, and not and ultimately with both of the things we've talked about here is making your bodybuilding or your physique endeavors complement your lifestyle and your life, and that will look different for everyone because everyone's in different positions with like kids, age, commitments, like the relationships they're in and what the demands of those relationships are. So I think it's just being aware to not just always compare yourself to others and focus on what you're doing.
Not only that, I would also go as far in saying that at first it will be a little bit more challenging because you have to find your rhythm. You have to find your groove. And doing that requires a little bit more attention, a little bit more time and effort in actually getting there. For us, it's now already easy to talk about it because the rhythm has been built and found over now several years. But if you get started, and sometimes this is also where people face the biggest challenges, is when things drastically change in their life. And this causes a lot of stress. This is also where you're seeing that bodybuilders in the Christmas or during the Christmas holidays, when lots of social occasions happen, when there are lots of eating out and stuff like this, where people fall off the wagon the most. Not because they can't stick to things, but because it's so stressful for them, because they feel obliged to eat a specific way, to participate at those social events, and they are not really ready for it, or not very well prepared for it, or they don't have the skill set in dealing with those social occasions. And because they are challenged by it on a frequent basis, maybe several times throughout the month of December, they start to give up on certain commitments, certain goals that they had prior to then December. And I think it's then super important to build those kind of, to build that rhythm, to figure out what kind of works for you in your given situation, and not expect perfection, not expect to have it all figured out, and adjust whenever you can. Right? It's kind of like the typical saying of you're falling to the ground, and it's about then standing up again and continuing to walk. Right? And not staying on the ground and just like, I don't know, be desperate about that you've been falling or so.
Yeah, it's definitely, and we've talked about it, like with our own building, our eating behaviors and diligence there, and experience is the cure. And actually Mike Chalice spoke about it, where he said sometimes it's tempting, especially because he's in prep, to pull away from social occasions. Like for the wedding, your wedding, it was tempting to be like, oh no, I'm in prep. But he's so glad he went, because he had to build a competency when he's not in his environment to be able to still succeed. And he was like, actually, it was easier than I thought. And now he has a better skill set and better stress management, because he has some experience to know in future occasions he can do that. And I think that's where, again, comes back to that bodybuilding complementing your lifestyle. If it means you're not going to social occasions and things like this because you're like, I can't stick to my plan, it's like, maybe you should expose yourself to those things every now and then, because there's going to be an occasion where you can't, even though you really want to. And then that's going to stress you. Whereas if you have built that competency through some exposures, you're going to be so much better able to maintain your habits and behaviors in those situations. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that, to bring that example back to Mike, even if he had given in and either not participated at the social event, or he was there and had a very hard time sticking to his diet and actually overindulged or so, right? He comes back, he can reflect upon the situation and make things better than the next time. Of course, his prep is impacted by that, which many people don't face. It's more like people go on holiday, they regain or they gain kind of 2 to 5 pounds. They feel a little bit kind of, I don't know, frustrated by it. But hey, perfect. Embrace that sensation and make it better next time, right? Instead of repeating that same mistake. Because now you know what it feels like. And now you kind of also know what probably led to that. It's not a secret. It's not a mystery. It doesn't really just happen and then poof, overall, why am I up 2 to 5 pounds? I can't really explain it. Of course, it was your behavior that led to it. And often it is a quite apparent and obvious behavior that led to it.
Yeah, this is something I quite often will pull my clients up on, where they will participate in one of these things and they're like, oh, I wish that went better. And they almost succumb to the fact that when they have such an occasion, it's never going to go how they want it to. It's never going to be better. And I'm like, hey, have a think about it. How do you think you could have made that better? Like, is there anything you could have done to make it better? And then they're like, okay. And then they can use that as a lesson for future. Like you said, you don't expect perfection from yourself. It's always just about small incremental progress. Once you've hopefully been doing it like a decade, 15 years, like we have, like then you have a very good skill set of making it as complementary to everything as possible. And that amount of time is required to make your physique like as impressive as it can be as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was thinking to go down that rabbit hole of talking about your progress in terms of physique because you've just shared it. But I think that we can save it then for the next time, Steve, because we're coming up on time. Because I was very impressed by your progress.
Surprised.
And I always feel like I'm making massive leaps forward. And then I think like, yes, I'm catching up on Steve. And then I look to the side and he's even bigger and stronger than before. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? I thought that I'm catching up on you, but you're always kind of 2 steps in front of me.
I got to say, though, like when I have recently seen your progress shared and your like mandatories and everything, like you always had nice shape, I think, but it just looks like 10 times better. Like you look like a bodybuilder. In that front relax, it's like, this is a competitive bodybuilder, like no doubt about it. So just in the same way that hopefully my progress inspires you, it definitely inspires me to see your keeping that up as well. And I'm like, hey, shit, I need to stay on top of it because this is happening. But yeah, I was surprised when I looked back. That's kind of the drive
that is always kind of a nice dynamic where you have that symbiotic relationship that pushes you forward. I think that most great athletes, and I'm not saying that here we are one of them, it's more like most great athletes, they had always someone else that pushed them forward. Someone else was in their rear mirror or was in front of them that pushed them to actually try to overcome them or stay in front of them. And I think it's a very nice and symbiotic relationship that kind of accelerates both forward.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, unlike those, maybe it's ours isn't really like a competitive because we both actually want each other to look as good as possible because it's obviously beneficial as a whole for us. And it's also nice confirmation that the things that we talk about and preach in terms of programming and all of those sort of things, they work, first of all. Like it's nice. It's like proof in the pudding, right? People can have all these arguments and debates about, hey, you should do this, but if down in 11 months you don't look any different, hey, fuck, maybe you got to reassess what you're doing. But
in the end, results matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't really matter what you think about something. But when it comes to also kind of normal markets, in the end, the results matter.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's pleasing to also have that because I still get people trying to debate me on, hey, you should do this with your training, and I'm just like, I'm getting to that point where I'm like, click on their profile. How many people have you helped get jacked? Can't see anyone here. How jacked are you? Not that jacked. How do I really want to debate you about this subject when I've been doing this for this long and have spoken to this many experts? I don't want to sound egotistical, but sometimes it's like I would always debate this people. Whereas now I'm like, man, I can see why someone like Mike is just like, this kid is trying to tell me how to train. Like, what the fuck? Have that some respect a little bit.
That episode has just come out, like this Saturday.
Oh, yeah,
so go ahead and listen back to it. Because I think that there's definitely some truth to it. And so for some people, it may sound arrogant or maybe even elitist or anything. I like to talk that way. But at some point, it's like you said, the proof is in the pudding. And also experience is just what pays off. And maybe some other person doesn't really have that experience in order to see what maybe the world looks like, at least for you right now. And the more time he then spends, the more experience he gains. Maybe at some point he will get to the same conclusions. And so, right. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful point to now end the show. I think that is just, of course, my own perception. I think that this was a very, very good episode, Steve. We handed out some great information. We've mostly talked about fitness, training related things. I could be completely wrong in my assessment. Maybe people are now correcting me, saying like this was one of the shittiest episodes that we've ever had. I doubt that though, because we are now at like 307 episodes, I think it is. So there must be one that is worse than this one.
Yes.
So thank you very much, of course, for staying or sticking around here. When this comes out, though, we have, I think, 1 more week to go for the London seminar. If you still want to get on board, then purchase a ticket right now. It is the end of the month, beginning of the month, depending on when it is that you're listening to this episode. So you should have some more money on the bank account that you are willing to spend and send our way, of course, that we then can buy some Lamborghinis with. Would you buy a Lamborghini, Steve? No, you're not that Lamborghini type. You're a kind of a British dude, so Aston Martin, a Jaguar, something Bentley maybe, right?
I like Aston Martins and Porsches. I just like a Porsche. I don't know what it is about it. Porsche
it's German.
Boxster, something like that.
You're into German stuff, I think. Right?
I'm definitely into German stuff.
Yeah. So on that note, guys, thank you very much for listening, and we speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.